Hello and welcome again. We have spent the last 3 months or so explaining the detailed research and activities of concerned Crown subjects, specifically the Magna Carta Society in the UK, leading to the invocation of Article 61 of the 1215 Magna Carta. We've also been debunking the false claims of the racketeering corporations masquerading as governments in Australia and elsewhere, that anyone highlighting the unlawfulness and illegality of every level of alleged public service is a potential terrorist who must be subjected to violent intimidation should they refuse to comply with unlawful edicts, mandates, acts or statutes. The levels alluded to include all bureaucracies, the police, the judiciary and the parliaments, both state and federal, as well as the totally unconstitutional rackets being run by, inverted commas, local councils and utility providers. The lawful notices which a growing number of individuals are serving on the perpetrators of these criminal activities serve three main purposes. The first is to inform the criminals that they are committing very serious crimes by openly supporting the overthrowing of the Constitution and thus undermining the peaceful harmoniousness of community life which the Constitution is designed to protect. The second is a process of education, necessary because of centuries of deception and propaganda as to the true nature of what the law is, in contrast to mere legislation, often in defiance of the law, which actually resides in the Constitution. The third is to compile evidence should those engaging in these criminal actions refuse to desist, for use in forthcoming trials de jure or before jury, following the re-establishment of a lawful court system operating under the stipulations of Articles 39 and 40 of Magna Carta. Most public servants are ignorant of the extremely serious nature of their offences, which include treason, misprision of treason, and sedition, as well as a host of common law offences coming under the general heading of torts, which we've discussed in other videos. They simply believe that they're, quote, just doing their jobs, a line chillingly uttered in the movie Schindler's List. Some will protest at such a comparison. Surely getting the local fine enforcement agency to cancel a driving licence or garnish someone's bank account or sending round the bailiffs to trespass and confiscate personal property can't be likened to the appalling actions of Nazi soldiers and commandants. Obviously not in terms of the absolute degrees of suffering inflicted, but the principle is exactly the same, namely the infringement of another's freedoms without just cause. For in the vast majority of such actions by these public servants, those being oppressed by these alleged servants have committed no crime at all. No one has been harmed by the actions for which they're being arbitrarily punished, in clear breach of Article 39 of Magna Carta. It is the supposed servants who are actually disturbing the peace of otherwise harmless subjects, and their only justification is, I'm just doing my job. It makes it easier if, as Dean of Law at Southern Cross University David Halpern alleges, we can classify these victims of government overreach as criminals. But that, as we have seen, is simply false. Let's move on from petty stuff like parking and speeding fines to the enforcement of injections, which have been proven to not only be ineffective, but actually harmful, even lethal in many cases. There is every reason to place these actions on a par with those of the defendants at Nuremberg, because the absolute degrees of harm inflicted are indeed comparable in both cases. Lifelong mutilations or death aren't reversible, no matter how they're applied. The motivation of people committing these offences, as described in the Mark Passio video, the link to which is in the comments box, is basically irrelevant. Does it matter to the victims whether their assailants were acting out of fanatical support for an extreme totalitarian political philosophy, or simply to put food on the table for my family? It's time to call out these atrocities for what they are and sweep away the puerile justifications of those who love to engage in the doublethink we've recently outlined. Most of these so-called public servants would agree that mafia mobsters standing over and extorting from ordinary people is unconscionable and should be dealt with according to the law of the land. Yet, what is the objective difference between that behaviour and being a standover merchant for an unlawfully operating corporation which is falsely claiming to have Crown authority and is thus engaging in precisely the same criminal racketeering using a scarcely differing motivation as justification? Clearly, while almost everyone is unaware of the true situation regarding the law and believes that the system currently operating is legitimate, this unwholesome social paradigm is set to continue. This is why the Notices program is an important part of combating this evil. We are hampered by the obstinate refusal of the mainstream media to expose these crimes. Indeed, they are actively complicit, as is easily verified by anyone seeking to avail themselves of the facts being displayed daily by alternative sources of information. However, this situation is about to undergo a sea change with the upcoming coronation of King Charles III, and this gives us all a chance to greatly accelerate the spread of the knowledge of the illegitimacy of our current administrations, one which the mainstream media will find it more difficult to ignore. The issue is going to arise because of the oath that Charles, as incoming monarch, is going to have to swear. Only about 5% of the British Commonwealth population is over 75, and thus able to remember even vaguely the coronation of Elizabeth II. Hence, the topic of coronation oaths is completely alien to most of the public. In video number 29, The Treason of the Bill of Rights, 1688-89, part 2, I outlined the various iterations of the coronation oath since its first inscribing in 1100. The Bill of Rights and the Coronation Oath Act of 1688 treasonously assert the sovereignty of Parliament over the monarch, denying the legality of the denial of royal assent and stipulating that the monarch swear to govern according to the acts and statutes of Parliament, asserting incredibly that no succeeding act of Parliament could alter this oath. About the only creditable aspect of Queen Elizabeth II's adherence to her coronation oath was the fact that she left out the phrase according to the acts and statutes of Parliament, and instead proceeded to the phrase according to their laws and customs. However, despite the numerous treasonous acts of Parliament which purported to grant increasing degrees of sovereignty over Britain to the European Union, she never once refused royal assent, which failure led ultimately to the triggering of Article 61 and her deposing as monarch in March 2001. The situation with Charles is even more fraught with tension. There is an excellent interview between Richard Vobes, Will Keat and Justin Walker on exactly this topic, which aired only a few days ago. The link is in the comments box. There are two main problems. One is that currently there is no public knowledge of what form exactly the wording of the upcoming coronation oath will take. It would certainly be unlawful for that to be written or composed by any person or group comprising a section of the political power elite in Britain. As the government has to be bound by the Constitution, it is an obvious absurdity to have the Parliament involved in interfering with its composition, which of course includes and encompasses the coronation oath. The second and equally serious problem is the fact that Charles has been a staunch supporter of the Great Reset led by Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum, WEF. Indeed, he helped launch this project in June 2020 with the release of a video. Such an attitude is in total flagrant disregard and opposition to the monarch's constitutional obligation to govern solely for the benefit of the liberties and freedoms according to their laws and customs of the subjects of the British Commonwealth. For Charles to swear any coronation oath to do this while continuing to support the WEF or any other foreign political body's agendas involving any exercise of sovereignty over Britain would be to immediately break his oath and in fact convict himself of treason, as did his namesake Charles I. This gigantic contradiction of commitments is even more irreconcilable, if such a thing were possible, than that of those members of the Privy Council who also swore oaths of loyalty to the EU. The implications are horrendous. If the king is unwilling to swear unequivocally to uphold and defend the rights and liberties of the subjects according to the Constitution, then plainly it could and should be argued that the subjects have no reason to swear allegiance to him, which leaves the monarchy where exactly? As a people, the subjects of the Commonwealth are still entitled to the protection of the Constitution, irrespective of whether the monarch or Parliament are willing to uphold the same. A treaty may be broken by any party, but it still stands in the breach, and the delinquents are liable to be held to account for any damages caused. On the other hand, if the king swears a presumably acceptable oath, then proceeds to depart from it by stealth or subterfuge, and this is brought to the attention of the population, then we're back to another Article 61 situation, with this time a lot more public attention focused on the issue. Currently, it can be generously argued that Charles has been misled down this unconstitutional path by lack of a full understanding of his true role. Although at age 73, one could be forgiven for thinking that he has had ample time to discover his obligations and duties as well as his privileges. But after this issue is publicised before the coronation, his guilt of abrogation would be palpable were it to ensue. To try to ameliorate these problems, Will Keat and Justin Walker, representing the organisations of the common law constitution.org and the Hardwick Alliance for Real Economy, HARE, respectively, have written an open letter to the Duke of Norfolk, the Earl Marshal for the coronation protocols and ceremony. A link to a full copy is in the comments box, which can also be accessed via the Common Law Constitution.org website. It is self-explanatory, but the main points it emphasises are the need to restore proper trial by jury in the courts and the exercise of the right of royal assent or its withholding, as well as the denial of the unconstitutional and unjustified push for sovereignty over British subjects of unelected, unaccountable foreign bodies. We await developments, but meanwhile we urge everybody to spread this letter to everyone possible: MPs, workmates, bosses, family members, and associated social networks. The need is for everyone to be talking about this issue in a crescendo of noise on social media, so that the mainstream media won't be able to sweep it under the carpet. This is our best opportunity for at least the last lifetime to bring this question of constitutional awareness to general attention and action. Don't let it pass through to the keeper. Thank you for watching.